Hi all, welcome to this, the first in what will probably be two videos in a kind of short review series that's going to be looking at population geography. Now, obviously, we covered the population topic quite a while ago, so these aren't videos that are going to be followed up in class in any particular way, but they're a nice little set of review videos to go along with the notes that you already have. Now, to actually start us off, a broad overview of the population topic. So we've got population density and its distribution. We've got population change, which realistically is focusing on the factors that influence both birth and death rates. We've got the effects of population change, and we've got the demographic transition model. So to start us off, population density and distribution. So first off, you've seen maps like this before. A global population density map. The darker the colour is, the more people you have per square kilometre. And the big thing that we're really being asked to do here is to look at this and to explain why we've got areas where we've got either a very high population density or alternatively we've got a very low population density. So now this is a short list. You've got a list in your notes that's a lot more comprehensive than this, but a little something just to let us kind of get stuck in. So we've got a bunch of different factors that have an influence on population density. So first of all, climate. Human beings like weather that's not too hot, not too cold, not too wet, not too dry. And we like this basically because it gives us ideal conditions, one, for us to live in. We don't cope well in extreme heats, particularly be they hot or cold. And two, it gives us conditions that are particularly well suited to farming. Now, one of the things that we find particularly here is that Mediterranean style climates are the kind of best natural climate for human beings. And if we extend, massively beyond that, we start to see population densities drop off. If we move on to soil, it seems pretty obvious to say it, but fertile soils are best. When we can see this naturally is with the river valley regions. Now, river valleys have got very fertile soil because river alluvium, so the material that's deposited by rivers when they flood particularly, is extremely fertile. So areas, and I've put up here an example of the Nile Valley, is extremely densely populated, and it has been historically, just because it's so good for farming. Now, relief, the actual shape of the land, we like areas to be flat and lowland. If it's flat and it's in low-lying areas, it's easier to build on, it's easier to farm, so that leads to, generally higher population density. The one kind of uniform thing we can really, really draw from relief is if an area is very mountainous, you will not have people living there. It's very challenging to live there, challenging to farm. Everything becomes more difficult and more expensive if you're up in the mountains. Now, resources. Realistically, here we're talking about do you have them or not? So if you've got a large natural deposit of something like coal or oil or iron or whatever, it tends to result in people settling near it to exploit it. It also results in more people being drawn to this area because it tends to represent a source of employment than if you don't have access to it. Communications. Now, in this, I put in a little kind of addendum here, just a quick kind of clearing point. When we're talking about communications, we're not talking about, communicating like I'm talking and you're listening, hopefully. We're talking about road, rail, ports, airports, real links between different areas. And fundamentally, the more communications you have in an area, the more people will live there. The better connected an area is, the more people want to be in that area. So if, for instance, you look at somewhere like London, which has got, huge amounts of rail links to the rest of the UK, all the motorways tend to lead to London in one way or another if you stay on them long enough. And again, you've got, plentiful routes in by air and by sea. It shows you've got an area that has got a huge population density. Now, technology, we're more getting here that if your country overall has reached a particular point in terms of technological development, you can support a more dense population. The kind of big example here would be Japan. You know, a hugely technologically advanced society, and is a society that is very heavily populated and is very, very constrained in terms of land mass. You know, Japan as a series of islands isn't tremendously big, but they've got, you know, huge cities like Tokyo, and the reason they can have that is because they've got the technology that they can use in terms of buildings and an infrastructure that allows them to support that volume of people. Economy, really simple here. We're more getting at this idea that if you've got a manufacturing or a service-based economy, you can have a higher population density because factories and shops take up less space than farms do. If your economy is still based around farming, your population density will be lower because you need more space per person to physically farm on. Now, as I said, this list is by no means extensive. You do have a more comprehensive list in your notes, but it's something nice to get started with. And if you're looking at, you know, your typical population density question in the exam, which as I know is going to be about 6 marks, this is more than enough to get you through that. Now, when we talk about population density and distribution, something that we need to consider is the push and pull factors that draw people to or from different regions. Now, particularly these days, we are looking at people being pushed from rural areas and pulled into urban areas. And now, a lot of this, and it's on the screen in front of you, you can see it, a lot of this is kind of reverse points, so you would really only really answer a question on this, focusing on one of the pair. You might just kind of throw in a bit about the second one to round your answer off. But the big things we're talking about, so, you know, when you're going to move from a rural area because there isn't a huge amount of employment, you don't have things like access to, you know, extremely good educational services, medical services. If we're talking about the developing world, the sewerage might not be particularly great. You might not have access to any entertainment facilities. All of these types of things are going to push people out of an area. You also, as you go through generations, you get issues in terms of land, and lands, particularly in rural areas, being used for farming, is getting split smaller and smaller and smaller with every subsequent generation. So if you think you've got, you know, a family with 2 sons, because in these types of societies it tends to be patriarchal, so we're talking about 2 sons that are going to inherit the farm. So it was 1 farm, now you've had to divide it by 2. If each of those 2 sons has 2 sons of their own, half of the farm has to be split into half again. And if you follow that down, you can logically see why in 2 or 3 generations, you're going to wind up with somebody with very, very little land to try and support a family on. Now, if we look at the pull factors, first off, all of these things, with the exception of the lack of land, because it becomes a bit of a moot point because you're not in a type of a farming economy anymore if you're in an urban area, you can reverse all of them. You have access to employment, you have access to better education, medical facilities, sewerage, entertainment, etc. We also tend to have a kind of an air of mystique around urban areas. You tend to find people have got a real kind of idea that they're going to move to the big city, everything's going to be better, they're going to get a better job, a better house, a better way of life, and all of that stuff will come to pass. And we refer to this as kind of the bright city lights drawing you in. Now, whether or not that actually comes to pass is an entirely different set of circumstances, but it is a factor that draws people to the area. Now, very briefly, and to finish off today's video, we're going to have a quick look at population change. So first, birth rate per 1,000. Now, why would it rise? Or what are some of the consequences, or some of the reasons behind why it would rise? If it's rising, good point is, children can care for their parents later in life because you've got more children available. Children are an economic benefit in areas where it's rising, or in countries where it's rising, because they tend to be able to help in farms, because if you're in a country that's got a high rising birth rate, it tends to be a farming based economy. It might rise because you've got a high infant mortality, so if you've got lots of children dying before the age of 1, you're going to have more children to ensure that some survive. If you just don't have access to family planning, again, you're going to have more children because you don't have access to contraception, etc. And cultural pressures. you may well be living in a culture where it's seen as a positive to have a large family. Particularly in some parts of the developing world, it's seen as a sign of male virility. It's seen as a thing that proves how masculine you are if you can father a lot of children. So that puts cultural pressure on having a large family. Some of the things that are kind of consequences and reasons behind falling birth rates. You've got a falling birth rate if more women are having careers in education. And it's purely, it's a biology and a maths combination, this and the next point about later marriage age. If you start having children later in life, you mathematically can have fewer as a female. That's it. If once a woman goes through the menopause, she is not biologically capable of having any more children. Thus, if she starts to have children younger, she can mathematically fit more in to her reproductive lifespan. Equally, if we've got access to better family planning, you will have access to contraceptions, things like that as well. And you tend to find in societies where you've got a falling birth rate, children are more of an economic burden. You're not in a society where you can put young children out to work. Children need to be cared for, and as such, it costs money to have children. Now, in terms of death rate, if death rate's going up, you're talking about having really poor living conditions, not having access to clean water or to sanitation, which are going to lead to the widespread of disease, which is going to kill people off. You marry that up with a lack in medical facilities, and death rate's going to get higher and higher. And realistically, for a falling death rate, you flip all of those points on their head. You're talking about having clean water available widely, having access to proper sanitation, having access to a good nutritional balance in your diet, and having access to healthcare. And all of these things are going to result in fewer people dying on average, which is going to bring your death rate down. Now, I'm going to wind this video up here, so this slide is a little bit of a sneak peek at the next video, where we're going to look at the consequences of both rapid and slow population growth, and then we'll move on and we'll look at the demographic transition model. And I'll catch up with you guys then.